Last time on Fight Opera, Roy Hammer began a promising night of talk show excitement at Absolutely No Wrestling Live, a show with no wrestling, all talking. What an idea. This magical night began with the entrance of Gallagher 3, along with the Gallagher family. Gallagher and Roy got into it and promised to settle their issues via considered conversation later. But first, it's Absolutely No Wrestling Live! The next guest interviewee was the Rowdy Wrangler, Fight Opera's young superstar, Louis Boots. While he told his tall tales about his own excellence, he was interrupted by none other than G.I. Jorts. Louis didn't enjoy the interruption and a brawl broke out. Suddenly, we had wrestling live! Jorts brought an assault against the charismatic cowboy, but it wasn't enough to overcome the rodeo roustabout, and Louis Boots hit the boot scoot and boogie for the win. After that, the Valkyries and End Ship showed down once again, this time in a game show. The challenge? Knowing the truth about your tag partner. A wrong answer buys you a shot from the Chairmeister. After End Ship's underhanded tactics led them to win the game, it evolved into a match again. End Ship tried their best tricks, but the valiant Valkyries appeared to overwhelm them. However, when they went for the pin, Spectra was unconscious even by ghost standards, and unable to count to 3. With the ref out of the way, Sandy Boom entered to count the 3 on a surprise pin to give End Ship the tag titles, ending the Valkyries' long and heroic run, which culminated with an emotional goodbye. Next came Drugs, seeking to make a public announcement about his still missing brain. But unlike last show, this time he found her, only she's gone through some big changes after teaming up with her new accomplice, Braun. The buff brain dispatched the distraught Drugs in no time, but he swore to bring back the brain we all love, no matter what it takes. Soon after, Spectra and Arbitro came out for a maternity test, a test they passed with flying colors. With unfortunately this lovely confirmation complete, BlackRock staged a surprise attack. The chairs Spectra and Arbitro sat in were in fact live chairs in service of BlackRock. Andromeda joined in as well, and a 4v1 match for the Cruiserweight belt was made. Boy, that's a lot of wrestling live. Arbitro fought bravely to overcome the numbers game against the pair of chairs with back and forth action, but eventually fell to the overwhelming odds when BlackRock and Andromeda got involved, but they weren't enough to overcome the honorable official, who once again fought off the evildoers. The chairs tried to rejoin the fray, but none other than Spectra appeared to show them a mother's wrath. BlackRock tried to utilize the Crusher Belt's powers, but was rejected as a false champion, giving Arbitro the window he needed to defeat the Bastard of Business and defend his title. Because his talk show with no wrestling had turned into a wrestling show with a lot of talking, Roy Hammer was in no mood for games. And rather than a convivial interview, he launched an assault on the Gallagher family. But his plan backfired, and Gallagher struck with a devastating treat. But you can't keep a good Roy down, and wielding his namesake hammer, he took the Gallaghers to task, but the numbers were too much, and Roy was crushed by the weight of his own sign, a Gallagher DDT, and of course a classic Gallagher hammering. But wait, what is a talk show without a host? And what is a wrestling show without an MC? It seemed the show was over and could not go on, but then, in the depths of hopelessness, who arrived but the scion of Robert Zombie, the undead host with the most, Timmy fucking Quivers! He made it official! He destroyed the no on the sign and turned the show into Absolutely Wrestling Live! And in his first act as MC, he orchestrated a title match between the heroic Gary the Goat and the power-mad Opossum King. But before that could occur, it was time for the Monster Mash Gauntlet, the winner of which would take home the Mummy in the Bank amulet. The non-stop action began with the introduction of the horrifying Furbilo, who was confronted by the foremost monster-loving Squatchman, Scooter. At first, Scooter couldn't overcome Furbilo's psychic strength, but eventually, he pulled out the creature's horrible battery and defeated it. Next up was the seductive Foxalatla, and a hot and steamy showdown ended in a tap from the legendary creature. BlackRock was then the next to appear, and he made quick work of Scooter. Card Shark was next on the scene to deal a hand of justice to BlackRock, and he got off to a swimming start, but BlackRock quickly regained control. Blackrock seemed unbeatable until G.I. Jorts, now gymnast instructor Jorts, gave him an object lesson in foot to face and took him out of the gauntlet. Then came Greco-Roman Reigns, whose old style of wrestling was no match for Jorts and his advanced techniques. Then out came the pugnacious party girl Pluriosa. Pluriosa and Jorts went blow for blow with high-impact assaults, but eventually Jorts spun his way to victory. Reggie Raccoon came in next, and using the powers of ethical anarchist principle, was able to send Jorts packing. Without a moment to breathe, the Tooth Fairy appeared. Their fight was more about ideas than combat. Even when Reggie realized that the Tooth Fairy was none other than the Catfish, he was more than happy to provide her with some literature, and they parted on good terms. Oh no, it's Dracuska! He began with his signature dance before turning his attentions on Reggie. And after Reggie was done away with, it was G.I. Jorts again, returning on a technicality as Ghoul Inspector Jorts. The athletic educator defeated the vampire with the power of dance and wrestling, ushering in Doc Master. Doc's powerful presence drove away the inspector, but Jorts was quick to return as gastroenterologist Jorts. Unfortunately for Jorts, years of med school and a mountain of student debt wasn't enough to defeat Doc Master, who set his sights on the devious Andromeda. The CEO of Space took control of the combat, but Doc Master's strength was overwhelming. Mr. 10,000 took the next shot at Doc, but found that knowing 10,000 moves isn't the same as mastering them, and was defeated with a powerful blue nose. G.I. Jorts refused to give up and re-entered as Grande Importante Jorts. Doc got the best of him again, leaving him with just one obstacle in his way: Louis Boots. The two warriors engaged in a back and forth of epic proportions, but Louis wasn't above getting some help. As Andromeda and Blackrock returned to interfere, Doc held his own, but eventually the numbers game was too much. But wait, who is this? A masked hero to help Doc Master? No, it is a hideous traitor under the mask, who was the tyrant of train law, Bull de Croix. With Bull's evil help, these devious denizens of degeneracy subjected Doc Master to all sorts of indignities, including literal whipping. Eventually, Doc passed out while choked with a whip, and Louis Boots got his hands on the Mummy in the Bank amulet. But that's not all. A new faction, most foul, was formed: the Heads of Industry, complete with a despicable hand gesture. And now, there is no further ado. It is the main event. Gary the Goat defending the belt from the delusional and self-aggrandizing Opossum King. Despite his deteriorating mental state, the Opossum King remains a true warrior and showed Gary the might of the woods. Gary fought back with equal force, and the two exchanged devastating maneuvers. Two titans engaged in ultimate battle. After a particularly stunning move, the patrician possum performed his particular perfidy. Playing dead, he lured a stretcher into the ring and staged a foul assault on a distraught Gary. Then, Opossum King took things a step further with a hot iron brand. He went to sear his heinous mark into Gary's flesh, but Bentor stepped in to protect his friend, taking the blazing blow. Inspired by his friend's noble sacrifice, Gary took control and hit Opossum King with a goat splash to secure the win and defend the title. Timmy Quivers reintroduced the people to their champion, and that was the end of Absolutely No Wrestling Live. What will happen next? Tune in for WrestlePotamia on March 7th at Austin Beer Works, Sprinkle Valley to find out. In the past, anything is possible.